Schön.
Мадушка.
dejk, qabri taħna.
Sinjuri, ħanisimaw ċabċifa kbira minn għandkom kollha. Edin naraw fuq l-screens tagħna il-Papa Francisko tila mit-triq prinċipali.
Tajjeb għadhom kemm afdawni wkoll li miegħu fil-karozza xtaq li jkun hemm preżenti l-isqof tagħna ċabċifa. L-isqof tagħna Anton bħalissa qiegħed preżenti fil-karozza. Fil-vettura fl-imkien ma' Papa Francisko min jaf x'inhuma dawn il-momenti, min jaf kemm għadan il-bniedem kbir.
Ħanerġgħu inxejru l-bnadar u l-imkatar ftit momenti oħra se jkun hawnhekk magħna ġewwa dan il-misraħ sabiħ il-Papa
Bħalissa qed nidhru wkoll fuq ix-xandir.
Eżatt qegħdin anke nkunu f'kollegamenti diretti ma' Television Malta. Insellmu wkoll il dawk kollha li għal-kemm ma setawx ikunu hawnhekk fiżikament magħna ġewwa l-misraħ tas-Santwarju tal-Madonna ta' Pinu, però qegħdin jarawna minn ġewwa djarhom.
Tislima lill-anzjani u lix-xjuħ li forsi xtaqgħu jkunu magħna min jaf kemm terqu għal dan is-santwarju u llum forsi ma jistgħux ikunu magħna u permezz tal-mezzi tax-xandir din magħna. Insellmu wkoll lill-immigranti Maltin u Għawċin li huma ħafna dawk li qegħdin f'kollegament magħna isegwu dawn ix-xeni tant sbieħ li żgur ħajibqgħu imnaqxa fil-qalb tagħna u f'qalb ħafna tfal li jinsabu hawnhekk. Jiena fis-sena 90 kont hawnhekk, kont tfajjel xkejken meta propju kien ġie Papa Giovanni Paolo II li illum jala wkoll jidher li 17-il sena mill-mewt tiegħu. Kemm aħna xxurtjati aħna l-Għawċin li propju din il-gżira u dan is-santwarju laqa żewġ mexxejja tal-Knisja Kattolika, Papa Giovanni Paolo II u il-Papa llum Francisko.
Min moment għall-ieħor il-Papa Francisko se jkun tela fuq il-Pope Mobil ħalli jimbagħad anke meta jasal fit-toroq prinċipali tal-Belt Victoria ikun jista' jsellem aħjar lill-poplu Għawċi u anke Malti għaliex nafu li hawn ħafna Maltin ukoll u anke ħafna barranin illi ġew apposta biex jaraw mill-viċin il-Papa Francisko mill-gżira tagħna ta' Għawdex. Jiġifieri minn mument għal ieħor qegħdin nistennew illi fuq l-iskriens tagħna naraw ukoll
bħalissa nidhru aħna.
Lill-Papa Francisko jgħaddi mit-toroq tagħna tal-gżira u ħafna nies hawnhekk illi ġew apposta biex jaraw mill-viċin u jisimgħu anke mill-viċin.
Papa Francisko!
Papa Francisko!
Papa Francisko!
Iktar! Papa Francisko!
Papa Francisko!
Papa Francisko!
Papa Francisko!
Il-Papa illi għaddej żgur bħalissa mit-toroq tal-gżira Għawċija, Papa illi għażel minn dinja kollha, għażel imma li jimxi wara l-passi jiġi anke ġewwa l-gżira tagħna ta' Malta u anke ġewwa Għawdex sab il-ħin illi jaqsam u jiġi fil-gżira tagħna ta' Għawdex f'dan is-santwarju tant għażiż għalina l-Maltin u l-Għawċin kollha, post speċjali, post uniku fejn ħafna u ħafna nies jiġu biex jitkellmu mal-Madonna.
Jiena rġajt ġibt il-mikrofonu, forsi nieħdu xi żewġ kummenti.
Għaliex le fil-fatt
ir-reġija mhix problema għalija.
Qabel ma jkun magħna hawnhekk il-Papa Francisko.
Minnu Papa Francisko għalikx qed tistenna li sejjer ikun il-messaġġ tiegħu hawnhekk.
Xejn ta' paċi.
Dak li għandna bżonn illum. Fuq xiex?
Fuq l-immigranti.
Tajjeb, il-messaġġ tiegħek dwar x'taħseb li sejjer ikun il-messaġġ tal-Papa Francisko llum?
Għal-paċi, għall-imħabba, dawk l-aktar naħseb.
Tajjeb, nistgħu forsi nieħdu xi messaġġ anke mill-udjenza ta' età żgħira. Min hu Papa Francisko għalik? Taf tgħidli min hu Papa Francisko?
Mexejm tagħna.
Okay, min hu Papa Francisko għalik?
Persuna li tajjeb għad-dinja.
Persuna li hu tajjeb għad-dinja xem misbaħ minn dan il-messaġġ. Flimkien jew inkomplu nippreparaw ruħna biex nagħtu merħba mill-aqwa lil dan il-persuna kbir.
Il-kuluri abjad u isfar, il-kuluri tal-Papa, ħanaraw baħar ta' bnadar u nkatar, nollum il-fuq, ħanaraw il-kulħadd.
Papa Francisko.
Il-kuluri tal-Papa.
Flimkien, Papa Francisko.
Iktar.
Papa Francisko. Papa Francisko. Papa Francisko. Papa Francisko.
Ħanaraw anka n-nies li qegħdin fit-triq propju hawnhekk li twassal lejn dan is-santwarju ta' Pinu, ħanaraw ixejru n-nies anka li qegħdin fit-triq li qegħdin jisimgħuna għaliex anka permezz ta' dawn l-screens kbar li għandna hawnhekk fil-fatt qegħdin naraw il-Papa Francisko għaddej mit-toroq prinċipali tal-gżira tagħna Awċija, hemmhekk qegħdin naraw illi għaddej mix-xewkija.
Biex propju jasal fil-Belt Victoria imbagħad jaqbad il-Pop Mobillu minn hemm propju ikun jista' jaqbad it-triq għal dan is-santwarju biex minn hawn u ftit tal-momenti oħra ikun hawn propju magħna, ikun hawn propju fostna.
Fil-fatt qegħdin naraw illi fit-toroq tal-gżira tagħna ta' Għawdex hemm ħafna nies illi għalkemm ma setgħux ikunu hawnhekk fil-misraħ ta' Pinu, però ddeċidew illi jinżlu fit-toroq biex isilmu anke huma jaraw bil-viċin lill-Papa Francisko għalkemm mument li għaddi malajr, però xorta ikollhom ix-xortu jgħidu illi iva irnexxieli nara mill-viċin lill-Papa Francisko.
U tajjeb kieku ngħaddu għal aktar mużika ħanqajmu aktar l-ispirtu hawnhekk ġewwa dan misraħ ta' Pinu. Ibqa' magħna mill-kor Djoċesan taż-żgħażagħ. Ejjew flimkien min jaf dal-innu inkantaw ħanilqgħu tassew magħna lill-Papa Francisko, is-suċċessur ta' Pietru fuq din l-art. Flimkien mal-kor ta' Djoċesi tagħna ta' Għawdex.
Trinsibna li ġru mifxula bla nafu tassew fejn sejrin. Ġejt fostna u il-pijam xejt magħna fil-klubna ħassejna mħeġġin. Min-kelma li tlammet għalina sirti kell għal-minu bil-ġun. Tħaltana għal-mida għal-festa l-ispirtu sawa.
Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ. Welcome to this live broadcast, live from the National Shrine of Tapinu in Gozo, Malta, for a prayer meeting led by Pope Francis for the second public event of his two-day apostolic visitation to Malta and Gozo. On behalf of Vatican Media, I would like to welcome you to this broadcast. Some of you may be joining us through various channels associated with Vatican Media, such as the Vatican Audio Live Events app, the Radio Vaticana app, the Vatican News website, or the Vatican News English YouTube channel or Facebook live feed. To all of you joining us through Catholic TV, Catholic Faith Network, Shalom World Television Networks USA, EWTN TV, Salt and Light TV, Atmadarshan TV, Shalom TV India, Luminous Radio, Radio Maria Papua New Guinea, as well as other, and his 36th apostolic visitation as Roman Pontiff. And outside the Tapinu National Shrine, you can see a large crowd eagerly expecting the arrival of the Pope for this prayer meeting this evening. We've just heard the crowd chanting and singing Pope Francis's name and singing various chants as well. The Holy Father left Rome early this morning, and after his arrival in Malta, he met and gave an address to the President of Malta, Mr. George Vella, as well as members of the Diplomatic Corps, Civil Service, and acknowledged the issue of migration, thanking Malta for its efforts in welcoming people in need today, just as they did with the Apostle Paul when he arrived as a prisoner on the island. And finally, the Holy Father denounced war and violence taking place throughout the world, urging for disarmament and peace talks to victory over political ideology. And we can see there on the screen the Popemobile lined with crowds waving flags and cheering Pope Francis' name as he prepares to go into the Popemobile to complete the final stage of his journey before starting this prayer meeting outside the National Shrine of Tapinu in Gozo this evening. And after the meeting with the dignitaries this morning, the Holy Father departed the island of Malta and he travelled to the neighbouring island of Gozo by ferry in order to prepare for the time of prayer at the National Sanctuary named under the protection of the Blessed Virgin Mary. During this prayer meeting, in which we see around 3,000 of the faithful gathered in the piazza outside the shrine, we will hear testimonies by Maltese Catholics who have been specially chosen to give testimonies of their faith to the Holy Father and all present at this liturgy.
Fuq din il-gżira u bekk jibda wkoll issa il-vjaġġ tal-Papa Francisko mhux biss fil-gżira kif għamel dalgħodu Malta iżda wkoll issa f'Għawdex biex imbagħad jibda t-triq għal Santwarju ta' Pinu fejn hemmhekk ukoll se jmexxi l-laqgħa ta' talb. Kif tistgħu taraw il-Papa minnu fih isellem lin-nies miġbura issa minn fuq il-Popemobile. Kuntentizza tan-nies naturalment viżiva kif għal numru ta' sigħat issa stennew lil Papa jasal fost.
And the sanctuary of Tapinu, which is in the piazza outside the shrine, which is Malta's most famous pilgrimage site, located in Garb, a village in the northwestern part of the island of Gozo. It's a Gothic-style church with a Latin cross, with a rose window on the facade and a bell tower on the side of the building, which houses numerous mosaics as evidence of popular devotion. We now see the Holy Father on board the Popemobile as he begins this final stage of his journey for the prayer meeting this evening, waving to and blessing the many pilgrims who are resident here in Gozo for this two-day visitation. and Gozo has around 30,000 inhabitants, and it's separated by Malta by a stretch of sea only 5 kilometers. It is a third of the size of the island of Malta, and inside it has a very medieval influence which is visible everywhere. And the roads of Gozo all lead to Victoria, also known as Rabat, which is a fortified citadel on top of a peak, which is not only the geographical heart of the territory, but also the centre of daily activity, with the main square of the Iktok market, the Cathedral of the Assumption, and the Basilica of San Giorgio. And on a hill, which is on the highest and most panoramic point of Gozo, is the hill of Debiegi. And this houses the village of El Garb, which is west in Arabic. And in the vicinity stands the sanctuary of Tarpinu, built in the 1920s, and in whose chapel in 1883 a local woman heard the voice of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and today it is the main pilgrimage site on the island. And on June the 22nd, 1883, a peasant woman who passed by called Carmela Grima was called by a voice who invited her to recite 3 Hail Marys. "This is one for each day that my body remained in the tomb," she said. The woman confided in a friend, Francisko Portelli, who revealed that he too heard the same voice with the same request near the church. The news of the 2 visionaries, who in the meantime had obtained miraculous healings, quickly spread throughout the island, and Tarpinu thus became a pilgrimage destination. And we see there close up now the Pope blessing and saluting the crowds outside, and they're cheering and thanking him for this visit to Gozo. And indeed, while the Pope was making the crossing on the ferry from the main island of Malta over to Gozo, it looked as if he was truly relaxing and making the crossing which many Maltese people make every day. And as we see the motorcade now flanked by security vehicles, but with the Holy Father remaining very upbeat in the middle, we see that he is making his way through these old streets in Malta on this beautiful Sunday evening, with many people there joyful and with the church bells ringing. And this apostolic visitation to Malta has actually been very much in the making, because the Holy Father has unfortunately, due to the coronavirus pandemic, had to postpone his visit. So I'm sure the people of Malta are very relieved for him to join with them in prayer and to see the successor of Peter making his way into their country. And Pope Francis is the 3rd Pope to visit Malta, and this apostolic visitation is the 4th of the Roman Pontiff to the Mediterranean nation. The first Pope to travel to Malta was Pope St. John Paul II, who travelled to Malta for a 3-day visit in 1990 and again in 2001, when he visited for 2 days as part of his Jubilee pilgrimage to Greece, Syria and Malta, following in the footsteps of the Apostle St. Paul. And Pope Benedict XVI also visited the island for a 2-day pastoral visitation in 2010, which was the occasion of the 1950th anniversary of St. Paul's shipwreck on the island. And during the beginning of his homily, when His Holiness Pope St. John Paul II celebrated Holy Mass at the shrine of Our Lady Tarpinu, he preached on the wonderful words of Our Lady during the Magnificat, which we will later hear during this prayer meeting. He explained that the words, "My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord," which were the words spoken by Our Lady, were most joyful as she reflected upon the great things which God had done for her and for his chosen people. How appropriate it is that the church in Gozo should echo Mary's song of praise at the shrine of Our Lady Tarpinu, as we celebrate the ancient faith of the Maltese and Gozotan people and rejoice in the bonds of ecclesial communion which have always united them to the Apostolic See. And during this prayer meeting this evening, the Holy Father will start, after a moment of silence, by following the tradition of those pilgrims who have visited the shrine of Our Lady Tarpinu, by reciting the Hail Mary 3 times inside the national shrine of Our Lady Tarpinu. There will then be a short time of prayer, which are followed by 4 testimonies given by various members of the Maltese faithful who have been chosen to give their experience and their witness to the faith which they have found throughout their lives. After a reading from the Gospel, we will then hear a short homily by the Holy Father before praying together the Magnificat and the Our Father. And the origins of the Maltese Church date back to the evangelizing work of the Apostle St. Paul, who was shipwrecked in Malta, according to what is reported in the Acts of the Apostles, in the winter of the year 60, during his journey to Rome. Its first bishop was St. Publius, who ruled the Maltese Church for 3 decades, before being martyred in Athens in year 112 AD. The Christian presence on the island is widely documented by archaeological and documentary evidence, and as in other parts of the Roman Empire, Christianity manifested itself after the Edict of Milan of the Emperor Constantine in the year 313. We see once more the crowd of around 3,000 Maltese men, women and children all gathered together singing songs of praise and once more expecting the Holy Father as he has this prayer meeting this evening. Pope Francis left Rome early this morning, but before leaving Casa Santa Marta, his home, he met with some families of refugees from Ukraine, hosted by the community of Sant'Egidio, accompanied by the papal almoner. And one of these families consisted of a 37-year-old mother with 2 little girls, aged 5 and 7 years old, who arrived in Rome and Italy from Lviv around 20 days ago. The youngest girl has undergone a cardiological surgery and is under medical supervision in Rome. Also present at the meeting were 2 mothers from Ternopil, sisters-in-law with their 4 children between 10 and 17 years old, hosted in an apartment offered by an Italian lady. They also arrived in Rome over 20 days ago. And the children of the 2 families attend school in Rome. The last family arrived in Rome from Kiev 3 days ago, passing through Poland, and there are 6 members in the family. The mother and father, with 3 children who are 16, 10 and 8 years old, and the grandmother who is 75 years old. They too live in a house offered by an Italian lady specifically for the reception of refugees.
Dan il-Papa kbir, il-Papa ta' żmienna, il-Papa
are the mosaics which surround the walls around the square. These mosaics were designed by the Jesuit Father Marco Ivan Rupnik, and these represent the 4 mysteries of the Rosary: the sorrowful mysteries, the luminous mysteries, the glorious mysteries, and the joyful mysteries, as an invitation to prayer and meditation for pilgrims.
Francisko qabad it-triq tawwek ta' tapija.
Ikun magħna nixtiequ li ma jarawx bendiera li l-isfel, ollu il-bladar il-fuq. Is-suċċessur ta' Pietru wasal fostna u huma ġabu ruhom biħnina u biħlewa li ma bħala. Ejjew nagħmlu l-istess, aħna l-awġin fil-kbira awġija biex nilqu propju lill-Papa.
And Pope Francis spoke about his apostolic journey, which is happening over these next 2 days, saying he was looking forward to visiting that luminous land and following in the footsteps of the Apostle Paul, who was warmly welcomed there after being shipwrecked at sea on his way to Rome. He said that this apostolic journey will offer a unique opportunity to go to the wellsprings of the proclamation of the gospel and experience for himself the Christian community there, whose lively history goes back thousands of years. And in his speech this morning in front of the President of Malta, as well as members of the diplomatic corps and other dignitaries, the Holy Father was specifically mentioning some of the topical issues which are going around the world today. One topic which the Holy Father was keen to acknowledge the work which the Holy Father has done in promoting the dignity of every human person. For example, through his encyclicals Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti. In the encyclical Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis writes that social friendship and universal fraternity necessarily call for an acknowledgement of the worth of every human person, always and everywhere. If each individual is of such great worth, it must be stated clearly and firmly that the mere fact that some people are born in places with fewer resources or less development does not justify the fact that they are living with less dignity. This is a basic principle of social life that tends to be ignored in a variety of ways by those who sense that it does not fit into their worldview or serve their purposes. The Holy Father also wrote in Fratelli Tutti that every human being has the right to live with dignity and to develop integrally, and this fundamental right cannot be denied by any country. People have this right even if they are unproductive or were born with or developed limitations. This does not detract from their great dignity as human persons, a dignity based not on circumstances, but on the intrinsic worth of their being. And unless this basic principle is upheld, there will be no future either for fraternity or for the survival of humanity.
Papa Francisko, Papa Francisko,
Papa Francesco,
Papa Francesco, Papa Francesco, aktar, Papa Francesco,
Papa Francesco, Papa
Papa Francesco, Papa Francesco, xejru l-bladar, ċabċiba kbira lil Papa Francesco. Xejru l-bladar, xejru l-katar, mana għanna. Ekku, wasal fitnes li il-mot minna, dan il-persuna ksib u il-Madonna ta' Pinu tilqa l-successur ta' Pietru, dak li wassal il-kelma ta' Ġesu bil-qawwa tiegħu ċabċib eżis.
Papa Francesco, benvenuto tra noi!
Papa Francesco! Flimkien, Papa Francesco!
And we saw just for a moment there on our screens the logo of the apostolic visitation for this two-day apostolic visitation of Pope Francis to the islands of Malta and Gozo. The motto for this apostolic visitation is taken from the Acts of the Apostles. They showed us unusual kindness. And this visit's logo features hands uplifted towards the cross as they emerge from a boat battling the waves. And these hands are receiving the good news of Christ delivered by St. Paul to the Maltese islands, and they represent the welcome that the Maltese extend to Christ in their neighbour, as well as the help that they give to those in difficulty. And from the images which we're seeing now, as well as every image which we've seen since the Holy Father arrived this morning, we are certainly seeing this love which the Maltese people show to their neighbour, regardless of who they are.
Papa Francesco! Papa Francesco! Papa Francesco! Papa Francesco!
And so you see now on the screen the Popemobile arrived by Pope Francis for the second public event.
Din iċ-ċelebrazzjoni ta' talb li sejra tkun immexxija propju mill-dusija
L-isbumetna nibqgħu żgur għażilt illi anka iżżur dan is-santwarju tant għażiż għall-Awċin u għall-Maltin kollha.
Nerġgħu infakkrukom f'xi ftit avviżi biex waqt iċ-ċelebrazzjoni kemm jista' jkun ma jintużax il-mobile u nżommu ambjent ta' ġabra u ta' talb takru li dak huwa il-motiv wara dan kollu li qed jiġri llum li flimkien mal-Papa nagħmlu it-talba tiegħu it-talba tagħna. Li xejru l-bnadar, nkomplu xejru l-bnadar.
Wasalna verament issa fil-moment fejn se nisimgħu il-kelma tal-Papa Francisko għalhekk nitolbu lil kulħadd biex issa fil-ġabra nisimgħu u nsegwu lill-Papa Francisko ġewwa s-sanktuarju ta' Pina.
And we see now the Holy Father entering the National Shrine of Our Lady Tarpinu in order to prepare for this prayer meeting this evening. We hear now a hymn to Our Lady, of which this national shrine of Tarpinu is devoted to, Our Lady of Tarpinu. And as I explained earlier, this devotion to Our Lady took place So it started from around, was asked to recite 3 Hail Marys, one for each day that her body remained in the tomb. And the news of this visionary, as well as another, has also been linked to various miraculous healings which spread throughout the island, and thus the shrine of Our Lady Tarpinu became a pilgrimage destination for both Maltese and pilgrims from all over Europe and indeed the world. And eagerly awaiting the Holy Father's arrival, we see on the screen now Cardinal Mario Grech, who is the General Secretary of the Synod of Bishops, and also next to him were Archbishop Charles Scicluna, who is the Archbishop of Malta, and Bishop Anton Teumer, who is the Bishop of Gozo. And we see now Archbishop Scicluna meeting some of the people who have been able to attend this prayer meeting this evening. That he will be to him that it is a moment of grace, because it confirms every Maltese in the faith, and when the Holy Father strengthens the faith of the Maltese, Cardinal Grech explains that it will send a wake-up call, because even though Malta is a Catholic nation with a strong tradition, we are also part of the world. The world, especially in Western Europe, which we are now seeing increasing secularization. The Cardinal also explained that he thought that this visit by the Holy Father would be an occasion for him personally to show his appreciation for the nation of Malta, and he believes that the Pope Francis can send a message to Europe, because considering the nation of Malta and the size of Malta, it is fair and just that Europe will not leave Malta alone in the human tragedy of the refugee crisis which we are currently experiencing. And we now see the Holy Father emerging from the sacristy and into the Blessed Sacrament Chapel of the main church as he comes to start this prayer liturgy on the first day of his 2-day apostolic visitation to Malta. And beside the Holy Father, behind him, we see the General Secretary of the Synod of Bishops, Cardinal Mario Grech, as well as the Archbishop of Malta and the Bishop of Gozo. And they're now spending some time in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament. And the Holy Father is continuing to silently pray before the Blessed Sacrament with the bishops and the rector of the Tapinu shrine, as well as the other people who are present inside the basilica this evening. And the Holy Father has now been given a golden rose, and this golden rose is an exclusive gift which is presented by the Supreme Pontiffs on the occasion of their visits to Marian shrines. And he gives this now to the Bishop of Gozo, Bishop Anton Toima, and he places it inside the Blessed Sacrament Chapel. And we now hear the Holy Father pray 3 times the Hail Mary.
Signore con te, tu sei benedetta fra le donne, e benedetto è il frutto del tuo seno, Gesù. Santa Maria, prega per noi peccatori, adesso e nell'ora della nostra morte. Amen. Ave Maria, piena di grazia, il Signore è con te. Tu sei benedetta fra le donne e benedetto è il frutto del tuo seno, Gesù.
Santa Maria, per noi peccatori, adesso e nell'ora della nostra morte. Amen.
Ave Maria, piena di grazia, il Signore è con te. Tu sei benedetta fra le donne e benedetto è il frutto del tuo seno, Gesù.
Santa Maria, Madre di Dio, prega per noi peccatori, adesso e nell'ora della nostra morte.
The Holy Father And the Holy Father now leaves the Blessed Sacrament Chapel and makes his way through the main body of the church. And whilst he is doing so, we hear a hymn devoted to Our Lady Tapinu, which has been sung by various men and women. And the Holy Father is now visiting and speaking to and blessing a sick lady as well as her companion, as he has done very many times throughout his papacy so far. And outside there are around 3,000 people who have been eagerly expecting the Holy Father's arrival in Gozo for this prayer meeting, who have been singing and cheering his name, and who will shortly join him for this prayer. And the Holy Father continues his way around the church, blessing many sick men and women. And we have just seen the Holy Father change his white papal zucchetto for one which was given to him by one of the disabled men present in the sanctuary. And after meeting some of the disabled people as well as the people accompanying them, the Holy Father has now just met and blessed some religious sisters, as well as some of the people who have managed to gain access inside the National Shrine this evening. And now he blesses a young baby who is there inside the shrine with her accompaniers. And we now see the Holy Father in conversation with a lady who has just given him a gift. And one boy here is visibly very moved by the presence of the Holy Father inside the church this evening. And as this hymn to Our Lady of Tarpinu comes to a conclusion, we now see the Holy Father exiting the National Shrine and making his way out into the piazza as he is welcomed by the 3,000 men, women and children for this prayer meeting this evening. And we start this prayer meeting with the sign of the cross. And now we hear a message of introduction from His Excellency Bishop Anton Teumer, who is the Bishop of Gozo. Your Holiness, Holy Father, welcome to Gozo.
Un'isola piccola ma grande di cuore.
A small island that has a huge heart. Welcome to our house, and the house of our mother. This shrine, the shrine of the Blessed Virgin of Tarpinu. A representation of this local church surrounds you this evening. It is a church firmly rooted in history. Children, teens and young people are here. There are families, many of them dedicated to pastoral care, and members of ecclesial groups and associations. Civil leaders of the island are here. There are the many priests, women and men religious, and members of secular institutes who exercise their ministry here and in other parts of the world. Your Holiness, we are very happy that you are with us today and join us as a pilgrim at the feet of Mary, Our Lady Tarpinu. So many of us come here often, many times with broken hearts, to pray and to thank our Heavenly Mother. Your Holiness, we ask that you help us to pray so that we become more and more like Mary, authentic disciples of Jesus today. Help us to pray that, like Mary, we may be more courageous in welcoming those who are fleeing, who seek refuge in our land. Help us to pray. Help us to pray so that none of our brothers and sisters should ever be considered a stranger. Your Holiness, help us to pray so that we can all feel more responsible for the gift of the wonderful nature of this island that is slowly disappearing under our sometimes distracted eyes. Support us in prayer, Your Holiness, so that we may be welcome material well-being as a gift of God, to be shared with our brothers and sisters, and not as a sign of discrimination and a cause of quarrels and divisions. Help us to pray
della condivisione siano considerate valori più importanti del guadagno. Ci aiuti a pregare perché la nostra fede non sia pura.
Help us to pray that our faith may not be purely traditional or lived as a social cultural expression, but especially after the pandemic, that it may be conscious, founded on listening to the Word of God, on the joyful celebration of the Eucharist, and on the witness of fraternal love. Your Holiness, accompany us to pray in prayer. Accompany us in prayer so that we priests, men and religious women, do not allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by the worldly logic of power, by money or by pleasure, but that we may live our vocation in a synodal spirit, in closeness to God, to our brothers and sisters, and to the people entrusted to us. Thank you, Your Holiness, for being with us this evening to pray at the feet of Mary, for this portion of God's people, for the whole Church, and for all of creation. Thank you, Your Holiness.
Preghiamo. Signore Dio nostro, che da questo santuario
Let us pray. Lord our God, you made the voice of Mary, mother of your Son, assumed into heaven, heard from this shrine. Through her intercession, flood our hearts with the abundance of your grace. Grant us hearts little by little, that this was my mission, to be close to my wife and carry her cross together. I learned that when suffering is lived with love, it does not remain suffering but becomes joy. I am sure that in this journey we have been greatly helped by the Word of God, which Sandy and I have meditated on during our Lectio Divina meetings. Even if at times there are moments when I feel shaky, somehow the Lord always gives me the strength to continue this way of the cross together with my wife. God is with us, He loves us, and He will not leave us alone. So let us look ahead with great trust in God, ready to welcome everything with joy from His hands, relying not on our own strength, but on His grace. And they say together, Your Holiness, pray for us and bless us. And after these very moving testimonies from Sandy and Domenico, we now see them move towards the Holy Father to be personally greeted and shaking hands with him, after what must have been a very difficult time for them and their family. And they now receive a gift from the Holy Father, as well as a blessing. And the Holy Father is now blessing one of the other small children present there, to a small applause by those present at the prayer meeting this evening. And so the crowd, those present at this liturgy this evening, wait in a few moments of silence, having heard the first two of the 4 testimonies which we will hear this evening. The testimony by Sandy and Domenico. And now we hear from Jennifer Cauchi. Your Holiness, getting from one place to another on this small island takes very little time, but Gozo offers some spectacular places where someone can not only rest, but also find refreshment when going through difficult times in life. That was what I was looking for a few years ago on a Sunday afternoon, when I set off in my car with no destination in mind. As I passed the shrine of Tapinu, I noticed the door was open, and something drove me to go in. It was the voice of the Blessed Mother calling me, as it was 140 years ago for Carmela Grima. From that day on, the shrine has remained my main destination. Come, because from Mary anyone can find the peace we long for, and in her arms is the treasure that fills one with joy, Jesus. From this sweet abode, Mary continues to call and give hope to the pilgrims who come to visit her. Young people, the elderly, families, religious women and men. Here everyone finds welcome, and everyone can lay their sufferings and their joys at the feet of the Mother. This is the house where silence is sought, far from noise and distractions. Even in the early hours of the night you can meet people here, including many young people, who stop in the silence of the shrine's churchyard to converse with the Blessed Mother. Many of our families come to pray the Holy Rosary in front of the Mosaics, that prayer which you described in your video message as the beauty of a contemplative prayer, simple and accessible to all. It is understandable, then, why in your journey to our islands, a visit that fills us with such joy, we could not welcome you anywhere else in Gozo, excepting this shrine that is so dear to us. We hope that your visit will fill you with refreshment and peace. Our prayer for you will never cease, so that Our Lady Tapinu will continue to accompany and protect you in your mission.
Iddiskrivejta bħala il-ġmiel tat-talba kontemplattiva, sempliċi u aċċessibbli għal kulħadd. U għalhekk, Għażiż Santità, f'din iż-żjara tiegħek fil-Gżejjer tagħna, żjara li timlina b'tant ferħ, ma stajna nilqgħuk fl-ebda post ieħor li f'Għawdex li f'dan is-santwarju tant għażiż għalina. Hekk din għalik ukoll tkun żjara li tagħtik serħan u paċi. It-talb għalik ma jonqos qatt biex il-Madonna Tapinu tkompli takkumpanjak u tħarsek fil-missjoni tiegħek. Grazzi.
And that was the testimony of Jennifer Cauchi. And we hear now our final testimony from this evening from Francisko Pio Attard. Dearest Pope Francis, your visit to Gozo, which we tenderly call the island of the 3 hills, at the foot of this Marian shrine, so beloved by our people, where our nation's dearest religious icon is venerated, comes at a very providential time. Like a father who cares so much for his children, you have come to confirm us in the faith. That faith which the Apostle Paul brought us when the ship on which he was travelling was shipwrecked on our shores. Throughout the centuries, this faith, which has been handed down to us by our parents, catechists, and by the witness of so many missionaries, has been kept burning like a lamp by our fathers. But it is also a faith put to the test by the challenges and storms that not only shake our shores, but also challenge the culture in which we are immersed. In a Catholic nation, whose social fabric is composed of so many different realities, this faith today finds itself disoriented between the religious traditions we have inherited and the authenticity of Christian discipleship. More than ever, our Church is called to be prophetic, to offer an alternative to indifference, to be a companion to wounded hearts, to respond to questions about life and death, to be water that quenches the thirst of so many dry hearts. Your Holiness, many today wonder how we can bear witness to the world, to this treasure, entrusted to us in earthen vessels, in all its beauty. We often feel challenged by indifference, lethargy, petty divisions among ourselves, and on other things that hinder the Spirit in carrying out his work. But on the other hand, this same Spirit continues to give rise to new initiatives of formation, fraternity and charity, based on the Word and around the Eucharist, which are truly a new stimulus to live the joy of the Gospel. Thanks to his very precious teaching, more than before, we feel called to be missionary disciples. Dearest Pope Francis, etymologically the name Gozo means joy. Today, our hearts are filled with joy at your presence among us. We express our gratitude to you, as we did to your predecessor, St. John Paul II, who chose to visit us to confirm us in the faith of the risen Christ. We assure you of our prayers, so that your mission may continue to guide the path of God's holy people. And we now see the second and third people who gave their testimonies, Jennifer Cauchi, as well as Francesco Pio Attard, greet the Holy Father, have a few seconds of conversation with him, once more receive a gift of the Rosary, and receive a round of applause from those present. And after these 4 testimonies, we have a moment of silence before rising to listen to the word of the Lord, which is from the 19th chapter of St. John's Gospel. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary of Magdala. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple there whom he loved, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his home. And we will now hear a homily by the Holy Father, Pope Francis. And this homily comes after hearing just then the famous chapter from St. John's Gospel, based on the meeting of Mary, Jesus' mother, and the beloved disciple John.
Beneath
the cross of Jesus stood Mary and John, the mother who had given birth to the Son of God, mourned his death, even as darkness enveloped the world. The beloved disciple, who had left everything to follow him, now stood silent at the feet of the crucified Master. Everything seemed lost, finished forever. Taking upon himself the woundedness of our humanity, Jesus prayed, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This is also our prayer at times of suffering. It is the heartfelt prayer. It is the heartfelt prayer that comes from our hearts. Sandy and Domenico, thank you for your love. Thank you for your testimony of faith, which you make to God every day. Yet Jesus' hour, which in John's Gospel is his hour of death on the cross, does not represent the end of history. Rather, it signals the beginning of a new life. Standing before the cross, we contemplate the merciful love of Christ, who opens wide his arms to embrace us, and by his death invites us to the joy of eternal life. At that last hour, a new life opens before us. From that hour of death, another hour, full of life, is born. It is the time of the Church, starting with those two people standing beneath the cross. The Lord was to gather a people that continues to tread the winding paths of history, bearing in their hearts the consolation of the Spirit, with which to dry the tears of humanity. Brothers and sisters, from this sanctuary of Tapinu, we can contemplate together the new beginnings that took place in the hour of Jesus. Here in the place of the splendid edifice we see today, there stood only a tiny chapel in a state of disrepair. Its demolition was decreed. It seemed to be the end. Yet a series of events would turn things around, as if the Lord wanted to say to this people too, "You shall no more be termed forsaken, and your land shall be no more termed desolate, but you shall be called my delight in her, and your land married." That little church became the national shrine, a destination for pilgrims and a source of new life. Jennifer, you reminded us of this. Here, many people entrust their sufferings and their joys to Our Lady, and all feel at home. St. John Paul II, today is the anniversary of his death, also came here as a pilgrim. A place that once seemed forsaken now revitalizes faith and hope within the people of God. In light of this, let us try to appreciate the meaning of Jesus' hour for our own lives. That hour of salvation tells us that, in order to renew our faith in our common mission, we are called to return to their origins, to the Nations Church, the newborn church that we see beneath the cross, in the persons of Mary and John. But what does it mean to go back to these origins, return? What does it mean to go back to the beginning? First, it means rediscovering the essentials of our faith. Going back to the early church does not mean going back and trying to replicate the ecclesial model of the first Christian community. We cannot skip over history, as if the Lord never said or accomplished great things in the life of the church in later centuries. Nor does it mean being excessively idealistic, thinking that there were no difficulties in that community. On the contrary, we read that the disciples argued and even quarrelled among themselves, and that they did not always understand the Lord's teachings. Going back to the origins means, instead, recovering the spirit of the first Christian community, which is returning to the heart and rediscovering the core of the faith, which is our relationship with Jesus and the preaching of his gospel to the whole world. And these are the essentials. And that is the joy of the Church. Indeed, after the hour of Jesus' death, the first disciples, like Mary Magdalene and John, after seeing the empty tomb, with great excitement rushed back to proclaim the good news of the resurrection. Their grief at the cross turned into joy as they proclaimed Christ risen. I think too of the apostles, about whom it was written, "Every day in the temple and at home they did not cease teaching and preaching Jesus as the Christ." The chief concern of Jesus' teaching was not the prestige of the community or its ministers, nor was it the social standing or the fine points of its worship. No, they were impelled to preach and bear witness to the gospel of Christ, because the joy of the Church is evangelizing. Brothers and sisters, the Maltese Church can vaunt a rich history from which the great spiritual and pastoral treasures can be drawn. However, the life of the Church, and let us keep this in mind, is never merely a past to remember, but a great future to build, also in docility to God's plans. A faith made up of received traditions, solemn celebrations, popular festivals, and powerful and emotional moments cannot be enough. Rather, we need a faith built upon and constantly renewed in the personal encounter with Christ, in daily listening to His Word, in active participation in the life of the Church, and in authentic popular piety.